And welcome to PM Express. Always brought to you by Syntex Tank, also by Cherry Tree Properties, Alomo Bitters, and the Ghana AIDS Commission. As you know, as far as Syntex Tank is concerned, no matter your water needs, Syntex Tank has it all. Syntex Tank is first to introduce a double layer tank, and now you can have as many layers as you want. Syntex Tank is first to introduce the inner layer, the white inner layer tanks in Ghana. We now introduce you to the customer specs order, which lets you order any color and size of preference. Syntex Tank gives you the longest warranty of 7 years. You don't have that anywhere in this country. Whatever your water needs, the size of the product or demand, you need to choose Syntex Tank. They are nationwide. Their agents are everywhere. You can call them. Call them on 0244 335 168 or shop online at syntexgh.com. A strong, a tough. Also, desires are wishes. Beauty is a promise of happiness, but passion is everything. Thinking about buying a new home? Talk to those who build with passion. They have Sloan Square. Is a new gated community. Is at Sakumono, developed by Cherry Tree Properties, and a one-of-a-kind, well-built, well-planned luxury you've never experienced. Please call them on 0553 662 366. 0553 662 366. Cherry Tree Properties, sophistication and class. As you know, we are approaching another election year, 2024. There's so much at stake. As a former Chief Justice, Georgina Wood, had said, while we approach another election year, key issues will emerge. Will it be developmental, about the people, or will it be another round of churning out propaganda? There's so much at stake in talking about Ghana, and tonight I'm delighted to be joined by a man who has been talking Ghana, doing Ghana, thinking Ghana for so long. He is the former UN Special Advisor on Governance, Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah, who is also the CEO, happens to be the CEO of the Kufo Foundation. Thank you, Prof, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Here on PM Express. And my first encounter with you was a CDD.
Many years ago.
Yes, we talk a lot about you being former UN Special Advisor on Governance, but we never rarely mention CDD. But you were a founding member.
Correct.
Yeah.
Back in 1998, myself and my colleague, Jimabodi,
Yes.
we co-founded CDD.
How is he, by the way?
He's doing very well. We met up some weeks ago to reminisce over our past and our continuing work for Ghana.
Continuing work. You still do that after all these years. You're still very committed and passionate about this country. What keeps you still active, still interested, still engaged, even when young people like myself seem to be losing the steam?
Oh, no, Evans. It's just that once you start something in your juvenile years, many years ago, you can't just give it up. You know, I got rooted in the Young Pioneers of Nkrumah many years ago, and the values that were instilled then seems to be running through my veins. So I don't know when I'm going to quit.
So this is till death do you part,
Well,
as far as your marriage to Ghana is concerned.
or let's say till physically I'm unable to do what I have to do. But
Okay.
once I'm strong enough, why not?
But I'm so curious though. There must be that thing that still gets you up in the morning to still want to do something about our current circumstance. What do you put your finger on? You're not fatigued at all.
No, not at all.
But that's what I'm trying to probe. Why aren't you? Because I'm pretty sure you know many of your colleagues and peers who you started with
Yes.
will not be engaging anymore. We call them, they don't want to talk because they're just simply tired. But what keeps you active?
You know, I think there's so much to be done in our country by everybody. And also, if you see how our politicians have been acting over the years, it's not easy to go and sleep and forget about your country. So I think all of us will have to continue to do what we can to help change the circumstance of the country.
Let me ask you a question, and maybe a difficult one, but compare when you started this activism back in the day, CDD, etc., to where we are now, at least in the Fourth Republic, with 30 years. This year we're celebrating, actually marking that.
30 years, yeah.
The Parliament has been holding events to mark 30 years, etc. Are we better off now than when we started in 1992?
Wow.
Give me a comparison. Have we improved or retrogressed?
In so many ways we have improved. I think in so many ways. First of all, obviously we have had a stable political system for the 30 years. We have, hopefully, we've put behind us the periodic upheavals as we are experiencing in the Sahelian region today. So I think that for me is the biggest achievement, the fact that we've been stable. But that stability really revolves around what you call electoral democracy. You conduct elections, successful or not, at least you're able to change governments peacefully and a new government comes in. That has been our biggest success. Then, of course, there have been some interesting institutional developments that we can also appreciate. The introduction of certain social programs, what we call social interventions, that seems to be helping the people. The fact that certain amenities are being gradually put across the country. I mean, 30 years ago, electricity could reach just about 35% of our population. Today, we hear it's almost about 85 or so percent, and it's growing. So that's also significant. This we can say, and of course in the health sector, some new interventions have been made. Educational sector, we are still struggling with that in terms of the content and how we produce citizens who can be relevant to the needs of the country and all. So overall, these are the areas I see, but you see, we cannot say this to pat our back as having done so good, because we could have done much, much, much better. Most countries that developed over the past few decades, they took about 25, at most 30 years to turn things around. And we are 30 years and growing, and I think the turnaround have been very, very slow. Been very, very slow.
Has the 30 years been wasted?
I wouldn't say wasted. No, not at all. I think we've done something, but in my view, what we've achieved is by far minimal.
We have underachieved.
We have underachieved. Because look, if you look at the tremendous resources at our disposal as a people, both material and human, because Ghanaians are well prepared. Maybe in some ways our preparation has not been the kind of preparation we needed, because if you infuse so much with the Western ideology through your education, it may blunt your own thinking about what you need to do for your own country. So those issues are there, but I think overall we could have done better because the resources are at our disposal. They are being mismanaged and underutilized. I mean, how can we be having owning gold and other minerals for all these years and we still even we don't have control over the gold? You know, Ashanti Gold Mine doesn't belong to Ghana anymore. It's on the New York Stock Exchange. And I don't know how much Ghana and the people of Ghana get from it. Perhaps besides some royalties, pittance though they are, to certain chiefs and maybe the government. Otherwise, there's nothing that we gain from that. If you look at the Mineral Act, Act 703, it puts our royalties at between 3 and 5%. So I'm wondering why our political elite are not even alert to that, especially when a country like Botswana has successfully renegotiated in its mineral contracts to get 50%.
The challenge you talk about the minerals, we've been talking about it since before independence. We've always referred to this gorgeous bit of economy that we still have. They want to tear down and build one that is based on growth and value addition. We've simply failed to do that the entire time we've been independent. I mean, so you question, is it simply incompetence on our part? Is it corruption? Is it we just don't care about this country enough? What's the problem there?
I think the answer is the combination of the three factors that you mentioned. You see, it takes courage for leaders to reverse policies that have been there for decades. These policies have grown on their own. They have tentacles all over the place. And if you study the mineral sector, not only in Ghana, but Africa generally, you will appreciate the difficulties the ruling elite have in all African countries dealing with their minerals. Because these companies come in with big cash. Oftentimes, they pay off public officials in order to have their way. So they sign contracts that are skewed against the country. And I have examples to give. When I was in Tanzania working with the United Nations, it struck me that their minerals were dug and the dirt were carried away to Britain to be sieved and sorted out. And they in turn would tell the government how much they got from the dirt that they carried away.
No way of verifying it themselves.
Exactly. And the local government, that's the Tanzanian government, had no role at all in that. And this story was told to me and a group, a delegation, by the governor of the Bank of Tanzania when we were trying to introduce a program to assist in negotiating over mineral rights, mineral contracts in these countries. So it is known that oftentimes these companies come in and bribe our public officials so that they can get away with contracts that are favorable to them. So that is true. Corruption is a factor. The other factor, don't care, I'm not sure about don't care. I think they may, but their consciousness about getting the right deal may perhaps be very, very low. Because I cannot understand how leaders can sit by, see these companies come in with their capital, of course, but take away something that is rightfully yours, and in return gives you just about 5% of the profit. That I do not understand. That's why the credence for corruption is high. I mean, you have to suspect that. But above all, I think there's a certain courage that you need as a leader to confront this. Look, in our history, I know that Nkrumah tried, he set up a committee to review the arrangements around our mineral sector. But unfortunately, he was not able to implement the recommendations. It was headed by, I think, if not Kofi Bakon, it was the Minister for Interior at the time. A champion came and saw that, refined it, and passed a decree giving majority shares in all the mining companies in the country to Ghana. He was and still the only leader who courageously took that issue up, because his mantra at the time was to give Ghanaians the commanding heights of the economy. See, that mindset that I have to get my country ahead, I have to make sure we as a Ghanaians, we control our own destiny. If you don't have that mindset, they will not have the courage to confront what others might say imperialist excursions in our country. So if you ask me, I think the problem has been the mindset of our leaders regarding how our resources should be managed.
What you've just laid out seems simple enough. You
So
don't need
simple.
a rocket scientist to tell you.
Correct. Agreed.
But they haven't done it. Why don't they have the mindset when this is so obvious? At least in this Fourth Republic, where there have been far more, the globe had made advancement, tremendous advancement in technology and knowledge. Negotiations have tools and equipment that you need to explore and mine for yourselves available, and add value.
That's
it's
right.
there, easily accessible. But we haven't done it.
You know how many times this and previous governments have talked about having a gold refinery in this country?
Forever.
Yes. Now I hear it's going on, but in a very, very minimal way. We have been digging gold for 150 years. We never thought about that. And the new policy that the present government says they are going to introduce because of the discovery of lithium in our country is simply indicating that they are going to get us a better deal. That is something better than 3 to the 5% royalties that we get. They're not talking about ownership of the ore. You see, when you owe something and for all kinds of reasons you don't have the ability to mine it out, and somebody has that, you negotiate, because what you have is your equity. Nobody owns that. So if you decide to let somebody, because they have the capital to come in, to take it and give, in return, give you just a 2% and walk away with the rest, I don't understand. Maybe we need our, not only economists, but our financial experts and mineral experts to explain why, if I owe something, and you as an outsider, you are coming in to help me get it out, then you end up getting the lion's share.
Because you take all the risks. You take all the risks. You take all the capital, you bring all the equipment, etc. So, of course, if you're taking the risk,
all that, cost all the risks that you just mentioned, Evans, and determine the value of that mineral that you're going to get, if it's oil. Except that
mineral will have zero value if you don't mine.
Correct. But the thing is, you as an investor, you need it. You want money, and I'm the owner. I also want money. So I'm talking about negotiation that will bring some equity in the share of the oil. But as it stands now, I think it's seriously skewed against
You're concerned. What's your verdict on this? That the way we're going, we'll be repeating the same mistakes we've done with gold and diamond, etc., with these rare earth minerals that we're beginning to find. Lithium is a classic example. You fear that we're going to repeat those mistakes?
Correct. That I've not seen any sense of urgency in reversing that trend. And now political leaders are not showing any vision that will eventually give us the lion's share of what we rightfully own.
When I asked you to assess how far we've come in 30 years, the first positive you pointed to was the fact that we can now elect our leaders, and there hasn't been an overthrow of the Constitution in 30 years, the most stable period in our history. Has elections yielded democratic dividends for the vast majority of our people?
You know, a lot of people are questioning democracy these days, right from the United States and many other places. There's a crisis in the system. It doesn't mean democracy is a bad system. In fact, there's no better system. That's why we all adore democracy.
But then why do we have more people more poor now than before? The gap between the rich is widening. Inflation has reached historic proportions again. We are having an economic crisis that we haven't seen in a generation. Food inflation has gone up again. All these should be indicators of a successful implementation of democracy, but we've seen the reverse. So the challenge is, I put it to you, that the benefits we've not seen, and so maybe democracy is not working as you say it works.
Listen, don't mix up democracy as a political system and the economy, which is the economic system that you have.
But the democracy produces the people.
I'm coming, exactly.
Who then produce the
democracy produces the people who manage the economy, right? But don't forget that in democracy, we don't have any prescription for the human agency that will manage the resources. Democracy allows you to elect anybody except what the Constitution prohibits. In our case, all what the Constitution says is what? 36 years and of sane mind. It doesn't talk about our background, whether you were a criminal before you entered politics, on and nothing. So in many countries, like the United States today, they are facing serious crisis because democracy elected for them a certain leader who perhaps is a different animal altogether, and they're having serious challenges with their democracy. Somebody who's prepared to reverse what the Americans have cherished for decades. So in the same way, if your democracy selects some people for you and they happen to be criminals or clever at stealing what you have, that is democracy in terms of electing people, but it's not a democracy that is going to give you the dividends that you mentioned. So I think we can make a fine line between the human agency that must operate the system and the system has been structured for these humans to operate. In fact, when I talk of constitutional review or reforms, actually I'm looking at both sides. Because democracy doesn't prescribe who can be president, we should have a system that will stop a deranged person, even when he's elected, from continuing. But we don't have that system.
Except that hasn't been our problem. Our problem, we've elected very sound, very qualified presidents in the last 30 years. Some of them, we can argue, overly qualified, who come in at least with a background of excellence in doing a lot of things. And yet, we see that the expectations never match the reality. So what is broken? Is it the democracy that is broken? Or the people who obviously give expression to the democratic tenets? What is broken?
The two sides.
Prescribe it for me.
The two sides are broken. Democracy, because I've had occasion to make the distinction between practice democracy and principle democracy.
So say it again. Our democracy as it is now is broken?
It's broken. For me, it is because it is not giving the dividends that we're talking about. So the question is, why is it not giving the dividends? So you can look at the constitutional framework to make an argument for why. Then we can also look at the human agency to also give an explanation, you see. And when I look at it in our country, for me, what is wrong about the system, the constitution, is the excessive powers and the discretion that the constitution gives to a president. That's part of the problem. Because if the president anytime decides to do A, B, C, D, without even referring to parliament because of the discretionary powers, then of course, is the system that has given the president to do what he's done. You see, so I think you have to look at the two sides. As for somebody presenting himself as an angel to you, and you supporting that person, and the person getting power and behaving like a devil, that one is beyond my explain. I cannot explain that. Because certainly we know that there are people who are simply deceptive in their own ways, and democracy cannot detect that. That is why it's important to have systems in place. So that when somebody breaches what is being promised, there will be a way to check that person.
So you made the point about democracy being broken. You've talked about constitutional review.
Yes.
I'm going to take it. When I return, with a simple review of the Constitution, fix the broken democracy. And what about the people who, of course, make democracy tick? What's wrong with us ourselves? But then, of course, that across the SAP region, it's led to a situation where coup d'etats have become very fashionable. And just watch Niger, watch Mali and Burkina Faso. When it happens, people are on the street cheering. They simply are tired of the democracy they've experienced because it hasn't delivered the dividends, and they want to find an option. The option they've settled for in these places is a coup d'etat. Well, I'll ask his thoughts on that. So if this is broken, how do you fix it? Would fixing the Constitution address it? And why haven't we come around to do it? Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah is my guest. Stay with me. Thanks for staying with us here on PM Express. We are talking about Ghana as we build up into the 2024 elections. Again, the democracy will mean that we'll have to elect somebody who will be in charge of our affairs, managing everything in Ghana. But as you've seen in the last 30 years, it hasn't delivered the dividends that we've expected. So what do we do ahead of 2024? And what must change? Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah is a former UN Special Advisor on Governance. He's my guest. He believes democracy is broken and must be fixed. Prof, one of your prescriptions is that the Constitution, we must do something about it. But that is another broken record over the last few years that we've been talking about. We spent millions of cedis, millions of dollars to do a constitutional review. In fact, their office is just around the corner here.
Correct.
I still passed by when I was coming to your office and produced a document that we have put on the shelf to gather dust. So why is that the solution when clearly nobody wants to implement it?
You know, I'm familiar with this story. President Mills initiated that review, and even when the report was sent to him, they had reasons to reject certain aspects, especially the most popular aspect being the election of DCs. The government rejected it. In other words, overriding the popular will of the people for their preference. So the problem, first of all, I think that the two political parties we have seem to have a vested interest in the current system. I think.
Maintain the status quo.
Exactly. I strongly suspect that they have vested interest. This duopoly benefits from this because if you look at their record, they've not been challenged enough to rethink, or as people will say, think outside the box. The powers given to the executive is so much so that anybody wanting to be president will like to have that power. Look, when you have the power to appoint people, thousands of people when you become president, you have power to veto investment that you don't want. In other words, so many things that the president has. Then why would you? There's only one person I know in his, well, not one person, but the one I'm familiar with, was this president of Mexico who was there for about 30 years, and he realized that his party was winning all the elections. He realized how bad it was for the country. So he said, look, I'm going to reform the system, and I know after reforming it, I will leave power, and I'm prepared to do that. He did. In the next election, he lost. But then he changed the political tapestry of the country, you see. So it requires somebody who has the country at heart to take bold decisions to revise. In our case, this morning, I saw the Ghanaian Times headline, the Speaker of Parliament saying that traditional rulers or chiefs should what?
Be allowed to get into politics.
Correct. And is it new? It's common sense. And I've said this many times. The Constitution sidelines a significant aspect of our existence as Ghanaians, thinking that the elite, the new elite, the political elite, the educated elite, we can run this country without the real input of the chiefs. My support for chiefs' involvement is not in terms of running for office or taking partisan lines. But I think if you look at the chiefs and their traditional areas, when we were creating district assemblies, we should have considered that at least for those localities, the power of the chief should be made to be felt by the people. The chiefs can be made to lead development in their own areas.
But must they be partisan, I guess is what you say, not necessarily political, partisan to do that?
You don't have to be partisan to develop your community.
But what the Speaker of Parliament was suggesting was...
They should be partisan.
Yes.
And that's not that's not my take. I don't think they have to be necessarily partisan. If that's the way, I have no problem with it. But my preference will be to make the chiefs effective in their traditional areas.
But they are already allowed that. They are already allowed this
The district
Nobody
assembly
stops them from doing that now.
Of course, but constitutionally, they cannot override what the district assembly says. They should lead the district assemblies.
They should lead the political system at that
of
level.
Of course. They should. Because first of all, they are the landowners. Do you know why the Minister for Mineral Resources ran to some big chiefs and pleading with them to help stop the galamsey? Why did they do that? After years of struggling on their own, they realized that the chiefs, the owners of the land, should have a role to play in how these lands are managed. You see? So I guess I'm saying that. And this is just a small aspect of the reform we're talking about.
But just on that, before we move to the big aspect on this chiefs bit, you also don't have a problem with them being allowed to engage in active partisan politics, which the Constitution expressly forbids, and the Supreme Court has affirmed in recent Supreme Court judgment, which the Speaker disagrees with. You don't have a problem with that too?
You see, listen, any sensible chief would not like to be engaging in partisan politics. But don't stop them. The sensible ones will stay away, because if you're a chief, the rationale for putting them out was simply that a chief is a chief for all people. So in your constituency, your traditional area, we have NPP, NDC, all the parties are there. So if you choose to be partisan, then be prepared for fireworks with the opposition.
Okay, and you believe we should get to a place where the Constitution amended to allow the chiefs to not get involved in that as well?
It won't bother me at all. Let them do it, and I'm saying that the sensible ones simply will not do it. Don't stop them. But my emphasis is on how we get them engaged in the development of their traditional
You think having them to be partisan would encourage them more to enter into that arena and be more hands-on?
Yes, in terms of development of their traditional areas. Because you see, if you want to build a school, you need land, don't you?
Yeah.
District assemblies struggle at times to get land for their projects, or government, central government struggles to get land. If a chief is presiding at the assembly and there's a project to be executed, is it not easy for the chief sitting there to make determination there and then? And so many others.
The counter-argument, according to the framers of the Constitution, is that the chieftaincy institution is so sacred. And politics is divisive. Politics is so divisive and acrimonious in our part of the world. If you allow the chiefs there, then you are now tainting that one institution that sort of become you know, the mediator sometimes. You've seen what Asante Hene has done elsewhere. That's why we should keep them.
I understand that rationale, and as I say, that can be kept. Or we can decide to open it up, and the sensible ones will abide by what the Constitution presents currently. You see, Evans, have you noticed that when there's a traditional event, festival or whatever you have anywhere in the country, the chief comes out and you see the crowd that follow? People even drive from Accra to be part of these festivities in their traditional areas without any penny. They spend their own. And the crowd that follow, the festivities that go on. When a politician is going for a rally, oftentimes they pay people in order to get a crowd. But chiefs, they don't. The loyalty, you see, in a way, we're still very primordial in our lives. We're still attached to the traditional things that we have. So to pretend that you and I, because we are educated, highly educated, so to speak, and therefore that what is tradition is below us, or it cannot be mixed with politics. If I wonder, I read the speaker's statement about the chiefs. What I was thinking about was the Constitution. In terms of the Constitution, even sidelining certain traditional values that could have helped to strengthen democratic practice. And if you study our traditions carefully, you notice the values we have missed. Look, traditionally, we are inclusive people. We are communal in our lives. Democracy does not respect that. And the good thing about democracy is that it's not a straitjacket. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And recently, PLO Lumumba made a statement on that. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The fact that the Western countries, so-called democratic countries, the West practice this does not mean we should practice that. Practice can be different based on your own history and traditions.
You've made a point, a larger point, that the fact that the Constitution shuns a certain category of people from active politics alone is a big deal for you, because everybody else must be allowed to be part of the democratic process, either at a partisan level, a political level, or whichever level. You think our system currently shuts the door to a certain group of people?
It doesn't shut it completely. After all, even though so-called door is shut, some chiefs are making noises all the time. They are endorsing candidates left and right. So in fact, that ban is ineffective. Didn't you read recently a chief sitting by a candidate to say, I'm all for you? And chiefs are making all kinds of political statements. They attend, some attend rallies. So that's banned by the Constitution. It's completely ineffective. So why do we stick to that? That's why I'm saying, look, if you open it up, the sensible ones who are chiefs will not want to ally with any party. They will just try to be neutral.
That relates to a bigger point that, and recently the former Chief Justice touched on. You said the sensible ones won't get in there. The former Chief Justice believes that's actually the problem, because the sensible ones, generally in Ghana, don't want to get involved in partisan politics. But that is the mechanism through which we produce the leaders that then govern our lives in this country. What do you make of that? Well,
the chief's issue is different, but if you come into the political terrain, that's a different story. There, you know, wise people like Plato and others have said that the punishment for the sensible ones who refuse to get into politics is to be ruled by the fools. So in the political arena, the logic is different. If the sensible ones decide to sit aside and allowing the fools to run the country, then they have no reason to complain, as we Ghanaians are complaining. Because governance requires the best. There's a recent terminology I think people have caught up with, kakistocracy. I'm sure you are familiar.
What does that mean?
Kakistocracy is a government where the least qualified and competent become the rulers.
Do you think that's what we have in Ghana today?
I'm not saying that necessarily, but I'm saying that democracy can be turned into kakistocracy if we are not careful. If all the so-called qualified and competent ones decide to sit out because, well, we don't want to be dirtied, we don't want to be in this kind of arena, then be ready for a collapse of the economy, don't complain, be ready for extreme corruption as we are having in our country. So I think in the political arena, the sensible ones should get involved.
Why do you think they are not getting involved? The reality is just that. A lot of the business brains, those who transform the personal businesses, corporate Ghana, brings not only in Ghana but in the diaspora, doing great things and transforming the economies of the West, etc., don't want to get involved?
That's a very tough question. Some get involved in different ways. It's not necessarily going to run for parliament or run for the presidency. It's the only indication of you getting involved. You can be on the sideline but still engaging. I think one thing that is not helping us is, again, is the way we do not allow democracy to work at the local level. You see, Ghana currently, our democracy is top-heavy. Everything revolves around government, the central government in Accra. So people right from school, without any experience, without anything to recommend them, can go straight into politics. And the next time the party wins, they are ministers with no experience, with no known wealth. But within 4 years, these people can be counted amongst the wealthy in the nation. You see, if we were to allow decentralization to work as the Constitution prescribes, then people can begin to cut their political teeth at the local level. Because Sindium tried that, you know, he deliberately went to the assembly and came. But that is not the real thing I'm talking about. Because somebody like you or me can decide to go to the local level and help my community by becoming an assembly member. Effective one. Look, if you look across the country, not that I'm putting anybody down, but if you go to the communities and you see the assembly people are representing their communities, you wonder. And you won't be surprised why nothing goes on there. In the first place, the system has not allowed the selection of the competent people. After all, look at certain DCEs and MCEs who are appointed by president. A president appoints people who are his party members and who are known to be loyal, but not on the basis of competence and experience. So you go, our development at the local level have been shortchanged for a long time. Nothing happens there. In fact, besides Accra, which is a little bit vibrant in terms of development, go to Kumasi, Sunyani, Ho, you go to these places, you may see some pockets of government development is paving the road, building the hospital. But overall, nothing goes on there. Because you see, political activity tends to generate economic activities. That's that close symbiotic relationship between the two. We are not seeing that.
Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah is my guest. I'm going to take another break. When I return, I'll let him give me his verdict on this current administration. They are the latest incarnation of governments over the last 30 years that have tried and attempted to try and reform this country and bring us closer to the development that we've all aspired to. And I'll ask him, I mean, we've talked a lot about, you know, going into politics and contributing. Well, what about himself? I mean, does he think he can contribute to this change, and in what form? Has he got any ambitions to contribute in a more direct way, frontal, I guess, to taking us from where we are to where we need to be? His thoughts on that after this. And welcome to PM Express. Always brought to you by Syntex Stand, also by Cherry Tree Properties, Alomo Bitters, and the Ghana AIDS Commission. As you know, As far as Syntex Tank is concerned, no matter your water needs, Syntex Tank has it all. Syntex Tank is first to introduce a double layer tank, and now you can have as many layers as you want. Syntex Tank is first to introduce the inner layer, the white inner layer tanks in Ghana. We now introduce you to the customer specs order, which lets you order any color and size of preference. Syntex Tank gives you the longest warranty of 7 years. You don't have that anywhere in this country. Whatever your water needs, the size of the product or demand, you need to choose Syntex Tank. They are nationwide. Their agents are everywhere. You can call them. Call them on 0244 335 168 or shop online at syntexgh.com. A strong, a tough. Also, desires are wishes. Beauty is a promise of happiness, but passion is everything. Thinking about buying a new home, talk to those who build with passion. They have Sloane Square, is a new gated community, is at Sakumono, developed by Cherry Tree Properties, and a one-of-a-kind, well-built, well-planned luxury you've never experienced. Please call them on 0553 662 366. 0553 662 366. Cherry Tree Properties, sophistication and class. My guest is still Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah, who is a former UN Special Advisor on Governance. And he's been talking to me about Ghana. We're approaching the 2024 elections. In the next 1 year, this government their tenure will elapse and a new government will be formed. Either they continue with a different face or we have a completely new government in. What's been your verdict on the way they've governed affairs in the last, almost 7 years, considering the expectations that they came in with?
Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind that a lot of Ghanaians feel disappointed by the failings of this government. Of course, this government can make claims of success in certain areas, and we can respect that. But overall, I think the popular verdict that is being disappointing. I think this government could have done better, or perhaps our expectations were so high it wasn't possible for any leader to meet. Okay, so I hope that in the coming campaign season, our politicians will lower the bar, not lower the bar in terms of quality of governance or leadership, but in terms of the promises that they give, promises that they know too well that we cannot meet. At this point, everybody knows the exchequer, how much we have as a country, we know.
In fact, we are broke.
We are broke. So if you come to stand before me to say, I'm going to pave this road for you, I'm going to give you that, I'm going to give this free food, free that, we should hoot at such people because we will know that they are lying to us, as they've done in the past. And this goes for both parties.
In which areas particularly are you most disappointed in terms of the work they've done?
I think in the area of governance generally, in the area of governance. Of course, the economic management also is a concern, how they've managed the economy, how they overborrowed to take us back to the IMF the 17th time, especially given their own utterance, their own rhetoric prior to coming to power. I think our leaders are not learning from the past, you see. If you come to rule a country that has gone to the IMF 17 times and you go in again, then it means that you have really been sucked into what we call the dependency syndrome. You are not looking at policies that will liberate your economy from the dominance of the external economy.
Except that we had a president who started with the mantra of Ghana beyond aid.
Yes, yes, and that was
the opposite of what
and that was a powerful mantra, I have to confess. When he first enunciated that, I was happy because it tallied in with my own belief in self-reliance as a development strategy. Something that the champion, self-reliance, Operation Feed Yourself, all that. So if you want to be a country beyond aid, it means that you are going to put your own house in order.
Has that failed?
It's worse. Look, look at the restrictions IMF is placing. Now for the first time, I understand the IMF has a policy guy at the central bank, yes, at the Ministry of Finance, yes, and we call ourselves independent people. We are not.
So we are not beyond it?
Oh, please, we are way below. Below it, you know. That one is a complete fiasco, I have to say it upright. A complete fiasco. Because the policies that the government initiated were not meant to achieve that end of Ghana Beyond Aid.
In the area of governance, there's a current issue that has been raging. Civil society has talked about it. It raised the issues of public conduct, etc., public officers' conduct. Where do you stand on this Isidiadapa issue, the former sanitation minister?
I think it's a tragedy for her as a person, and a tragedy for the government, and a tragedy for the nation.
Why?
Because when you're in the midst of such impoverishment, you are in an economy that is sinking and people are really hard-pressed, and you are discovered to have that amount in your room, then only the good Lord knows how much more you have and how much more your own colleagues may have. It raises all kinds of questions, you see. That's why it's a tragedy. Even if the money is hers legitimately, the fact that she will keep such an amount in the house in itself is repugnant for a public official.
And then this has raised the issue of the public officers conduct bill and a code of conduct for them that has been in the works for so long. What's your verdict on what should happen now?
Our politicians are very tricky. I call them professional politicians. Those whose whole life, I think, revolves around politics. They don't have any other profession, even when they are out of government. These are professional politicians. You see, we have what we call the asset declaration. The law itself is defective because it makes you declare the assets, give it to the Auditor General, Accountant General, you lock it up. That's it. When you leave office, nobody knows about that. Civil society has been raising concerns about that. If the asset declaration were effective, I'm sure some of these lapses that we're just talking about would not have occurred. Because at every period, specified period, we will examine how much you have. But we don't have that. The public code of conduct for public officers, that's another important thing we should make sure we pass. But I understand that both sides are not too keen on it because they are afraid of accountability, you see. And that is why I think somehow a new thinking should emerge. And I'm not sure it can emerge from these two parties.
Where should it come from?
It should come from civil society, those who have been sitting on the fence. I think unless those already in the game can reset their minds.
You think they can?
To be tough.
Okay.
They have enjoyed this too much.
I think that to mean near impossible.
Yeah.
So you say it should come from elsewhere.
Yeah.
You say civil society. What about yourself?
Well, Evans, look, anytime there's a strong sense that there's a need for my services in any way that will support the country, I will offer myself. But if you're talking about the presidency, I believe there are some capable people amongst those who have not entered politics who can emerge. And if such people emerge, people like us should throw our whole weight behind them. Because I seriously believe that we need a third force, not necessarily a political party, but a movement that can come to reset the path of progress for this country. Because the path we are treading currently is not going to take us anywhere.
Will you throw your hat in?
Well, I'm not in politics, so I'm not going to throw my hat for this or that party.
No, I mean, but stand by yourself as an independent third force, maybe, an option to the duopoly.
I'm not too sure the people of Ghana will want somebody like me for all kinds of reasons. But as I say, if the opportunity comes and I have to offer myself, why not? I've loved this country for a long time.
And that is Professor Baffour Agyeman-Duah has been my guest on PM Express, talking everything Ghana. We've talked a lot about his verdict on our democracy. He says it's broken. He says, as you heard him, if it comes to it, well, he will not run away from that responsibility. A lot to chew on as we approach 2024. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you, Prof.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.